Hey, y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is. It's your boy Pharaoh, the guy always on the job. I got five less talk, and as always, it's real talk, raw talk, and you know it's that time again to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend. Share, like, and subscribe. Don't hide. It don't cost you much to touch, so go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and tell a friend to tell a friend. Welcome to another episode of I Got Five Let's Talk. Back on the war report. Is Israel in big trouble? This war has been going on. A lot of things we've seen. NATO not want to get into the war. We've seen France not want to get into the war. We've seen certain NATO countries restricting their airspace from American military and Israel military. And I've always said that a lot of people are starting to find their way to the reality of what the Israeli community is doing. So today, we just gonna go ahead, play this content, and commentate on it. Let's go.
So there is this map that I want to show you. This is actually from November 2011, when the United Nations held a big vote about Palestine, and we'll get to what that was in a second. These are the countries that backed Israel in voting no, and these countries abstained, which was basically the same thing. What you were looking at here is the pro-Israel world as of 2011, mostly Western countries and small nations that depend on them. These are the governments that arm Israel's military, that support it diplomatically, that shield it from international pressure. And to understand how far that support went, it helps to look at what that 2011 UN vote, the map, was actually for. This is a UN agency called UNESCO. That name stands for Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and they do like events and educational grants. It's all very benign and boring. The Palestinian government asked to join it, and from the UN's perspective, yeah, no big deal. The UN resolution that established Israel back in 1947 also called for an independent Arab state in Palestine. So, according to the UN, Palestine is a state just as much as Israel. It should be allowed to join this nice cultural agency. But Israel opposed this because they did not want anything that legitimized the idea of Palestine as a state. And these 65 countries sided with Israel. That's how far they went for them. But that was 2011. Check out what one of those blue countries is up to today. This is Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni.
Italy has criticized Israeli attacks peacekeepers there. In light of the current situation, the government has decided to suspend the automatic renewal of the defense agreement with Israel.
This is a huge pivot, and this kind of thing has been happening a lot. Israel's backers, that network of countries that have been supporting it for decades, they've been kind of turning on it, one by one, often in small ways, but it is adding up. And today, we're going to look at what all of that is adding up to. We're going to ask what this means for Israel, and what happens when the international support it's long counted on to do everything that it does starts to look like it could really go away.
This is app called Tester Up. You download games. This is the easiest side hustle.
Away. So I'm going to give away the ending slightly here and tell you that Israel has actually been quietly preparing for years now a plan for what to do if and when it loses the international support it relies on. We'll also look at why this is happening now
And just to throw something out there for Clarence, if you look back in history, everywhere that the Ashkenazi, or those that call themselves Jews, have been dispelled or kicked out of, they have always had a plan to bring about economic destruction for that country, for that region. It has always started a war, so to speak. So what is Israel's plan if people stop supporting them? We know they won't stop attacking Iran. We know that they didn't stop attacking Lebanon. And I know people might sit up here and say, but Pharaoh, these organizations are terrorists. Well, what do you call Mossad? What do you call 60% of the Israeli population that supports the government and its genocidal behavior in the West Bank? And they support the genocidal behavior in Lebanon. And they support attacking Iran for no other reason than they don't like them. This is the outcome of Israel. This is not some hocus pocus 4K, run of the mill play or something. This is real talk. And now the EU is charging and labeling West Bank settlers as terrorists. And it's certain companies that are targeting these settlers. These companies that move these settlers in, take over land. But why does it, this is my question. When is Israel ever gonna have the spotlight on them and they do something good? That's what I wanna know. Every time the spotlight gets on Israel, it just is like, oh, the spotlight on us. Let's do some more terroristic activity so we can scare the world into doing what we want them to do. In order to scare the world, you have to do the most strenuous, the most nefarious, and the most downtrodden behavior. You have to. You have to show the people that you are willing to go to the end of the world to get your agenda met. And that's what Israel is doing. But through this behavior, they are getting themselves turned on. Pause. Turned against. The European Union, and this is what I was telling everybody, this is the reason the European Union has not backed Israel. Because they know once Israel gains the upper hand, it is over for the rest of the world. How do y'all think that Israel is going to repay the rest of the world by not backing them in their war against the Muslims? You already see him attacking Muslim countries. And the citizens of Israel are now festering into the West Bank and taking over. Let's run this content and see what's going on.
What it means that it is. But we begin by simply going through country by country on the map what is changing here. Starting early 2024, the height of Israel's war in Gaza. Experts were calling it a genocide. The International Criminal Court was preparing charges for war crimes. And that April, the UN did what it does. It held a symbolic, non-binding vote. This one, on admission of new members, that said, in theory, Palestine was qualified for membership. In other words, to be recognized as a state. The US had vetoed that, though, so all this actually changed was where the powerless Palestinian representative was seated in the UN assembly room. Still, this was a chance for countries to take...
But hold it, let me hold it right there. How does America say no to Palestine being recognized as a sovereign nation, as a state? Palestine is the country that was invaded by immigrants. They let the immigrants come in, and now the immigrants are causing trouble. I wonder what country that sounds like. Palestine was Palestine before 1948. But Trump said, no, we will not recognize Palestine as a sovereign nation. Why?
Aside. And a lot of them that had long sided with Israel used this vote to signal that that was kind of over. Look at that map again. We're going to label all of the countries that went from voting with Israel back in 2011 to voting against it in 2024. Australia and New Zealand, important Western countries. Japan and South Korea, major economies, usually vote with the West. A bunch of countries in Africa and the Caribbean that rely on Western support. A few other big ones. But also, and this was a big deal, a bunch of Europe. Denmark, Poland, Portugal, Estonia, plus a couple more. So look, Denmark and Poland, I know, not exactly the big.
And this is what you got to realize too. And I know people, like he was about to say, people are going to say Denmark, Poland, Hungary, all this, they're not big, but they are a part of the launching pad. This is where they don't want you to be aware of the agenda. See, they say, oh, well, you know, Denmark, Poland, they're not that big. If they weren't that big, explain to me why America has bases in that region. If they're not that big, explain to me why Poland has one of the biggest military arsenals in the EU, in NATO. They have one of the biggest military in Europe, but they don't matter. The country matters as much as the agenda. So if you take away Poland and Denmark from America, that is strategy lost. Strategic air coverage lost. NATO is getting tired of being looked at like the tiny guy that's a nobody. NATO is tired of it. Every time you turn on the TV, you hear NATO has another problem with Trump. NATO is a disgruntled employee. NATO is falling apart. Why? Because nobody wants to back Israel. Nobody. And if we can't put sanctions on them, Europe said we're going to do the least that we can do. And that's to put charges on you. Let's finish rolling this clip.
It's world powers. But Europe, collectively, is Israel's biggest trading partner. It's their biggest source of tourists. It's their second biggest supplier of weapons after the United States. Europe is what expands the pro-Israel sphere from a niche American thing into a broad Western coalition. So any chip in that, it's a big deal. And then 2026, the Iran war hits.
The U.S. and Israel have launched strikes and a major military operation targeting Iran.
The Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, is dead. For the first time in history, Iranian officials say the country has closed the Strait of Hormuz following joint strikes from the U.S. and Israel.
Which didn't just offend sensibilities and values in Europe, it really messed up their economies.
The country is facing widespread disruption as fuel protests continue, with major roads blocked and shortages beginning to emerge.
So pretty soon you got stuff like this.
Il est évident qu'il nous faut pouvoir hausser le ton dans les sanctions.
This is Belgium's foreign minister.
Suspension à tout le moins partielle de l'accord d'association entre Israël et l'Union européenne.
He is talking about trade sanctions on Israel, the kind of thing you do to a hostile rogue state. He even went on to say that Belgium would support a total EU boycott. Here, let's zoom in on Europe, because it's not just Belgium. Spain, Ireland, and Slovenia are also calling for the EU to sanction Israel. Ukraine threatened sanctions too, over Israel importing grain from its Russian-occupied territory. Israel stopped the stolen grain import, but the threat is still hanging. Also remember, we saw that Italy suspended a defense cooperation deal. But the really big turn has been France. France recently closed its airspace to Israeli flights carrying weapon shipments. It's a symbolic step, sure, but a big enough warning shot that Israel, in response, halted all arms.
Is it really a minor step? If we analyze why France is not backing Israel, you have to go to Africa. And I did this on the war report. I'm not gonna elongate it today, but I'm gonna try to give you the short version. Israel is not in this war because France is not in the American-Israeli war with Iran, because when France was kicked out of West Africa, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, 3 countries that helped keep the lights on in Europe, throughout Europe. Not only keep the lights on, but help feed Europe. Not only help keep the lights on and keeps their bellies full, but also it has placed them in position of great monetary fund. And now that they have been kicked out by these three countries, they are running the risk of collapsing. Where was America then? Where was Israel and all its technology then? Where was the help? France helped construct NATO. NATO is number 2 on the shits. France is number 2. So big in NATO. France runs the European NATO. France didn't get no help when they got kicked out of Africa. Losing billions of billion dollars a day. France is not in the predicament that it is in now because of poor economics on its own soil. France is in the predicament it is in now because of foreign policy. People's foreign policies are fucked up. And since they made livelihood off of other people's natural resources and sovereignty, now they are finding what it means when you put all your chickens in one basket. France has put all its eggs in one basket. For what? For what? Because they were under the impression that they were going to be able to siphon, auction off, steal Africa's natural resource. They thought it was going to be able to go on for forever. So when they got kicked out, I'm pretty sure they went to America and asked America, but America didn't help. Israel didn't help. The same people that get money off of France's colonization. The friends weren't friended when the friend needed a friend. And now America and Israel is facing the same consequences from the EU. The same people, they did not help out. This is why NATO is falling apart. This is why the EU is leaving NATO. This is why other countries around the world are looking to China, looking to Russia, looking to Turkey, looking to Iran, looking to Burkina Faso for futuristic development. Why? Because these are people that allowed America to play the stage for decades. And they said when it's all said and done, you know what we gonna tell the people when the curtains get pulled back? Shit, nigga, I ain't Michael Jackson, I'm Tito. I'm the backup dancer, nigga. I wasn't doing none of that shit. That's what's gonna happen. Instead of people accepting their lane, they're gonna say, I was the backup dancer. I wasn't the singer. And this is what France realized America and Israel did to them in Africa. They didn't give them no help, because when they went to go help, they told the Africans, look, man, I was the backup dancer. France was the Michael Jackson. It was France that was Michael Jackson, not me. The whole time, the perpetrator is throwing it off on Mike. Cold analogy, huh? They threw it off on Mike and killed him. So France didn't get no help. France is losing all of its credibility and leverage. That's why France is not in it. That's why Israel and NATO, it's France and NATO versus Israel and America. Let's continue to roll this.
Purchases from France. This is a real loss for Israel. French weapons make up a ton of Israel's imports. Like, check this out. You can see it here. This is the EU data for every European arms sale. And if you look at the top arms sales to Israel, a ton of them are from France. Like, all the biggest ones. You must wonder if Israel did this to preempt France from doing it first. You know, you can't break up with me, I break up with you. Anyway, the point is, this is effectively a quasi-self-imposed French arms embargo on Israel, which joins a Spanish arms embargo imposed a few months earlier. So, yeah, this is Europe on Israel today. You can see, it's a pretty meaningful pivot. But now we gotta talk about it.
Tired of calling the 1-800 number to get your EBT balance? Propel is the #1 EBT app. Trusted.
Fuck, man, goddamn, fuck the shit off.
You can see, it's a pretty meaningful pivot. But now we gotta talk about the US.
The time is now for us to end all U.S. military aid to the extremist Netanyahu government.
This is Senator Bernie Sanders recently introducing a resolution that would block all U.S. arms sales to Israel. It did not pass, but it was closer than you might guess, 40 to 59.
On this vote,
Did you hear that number? 40 to 59. This is where I say the war is changing. And I told y'all, in order for this war to change, Trump is going to have to turn on Israel. Why? Because America created Israel. That's why. And the only way to deal with Israel is America. And how are they going to make sure? How is NATO and the European Union going to make sure America deals with Israel? Blockades. Weapon blockades. Once the world starts standing up to Israel, the American people will shift in their opinion like they're shifting now. And it won't be in the favor of Israel or America. 49 to 50 or 59 to 40, however it was. The perception of Israel being the victim is over.
the yeas are 40, the nays 59. The motion is not agreed to.
And like the UN votes or the EU threats, this was about sending a signal. 40 US senators voted for an arms embargo. That is a message that almost half of the American political system is ready to really turn on Israel. And that's not just a signal to Israel, which, let's face it, seems unlikely to change behavior. It's a signal to all of these other countries that global pro-Israel coalition is getting closer and closer to breaking apart. So it's time to ask why. Why now? The simplest explanation would be that this is all in reaction to Gaza and to the Iran war. But I think the truth is that those things are just catalysts, pushing along a change that's been building for a long time now. This is a foreign policy article warning Israel that it lost Europe.
People, see, the same thing that make you laugh is the same thing that make you cry. A lot of people look at the internet and they say it's a perversion. It's all about how you use it. And people, they may not be learning it in school. But guess what people do with this internet now? Man, let me go pull this up and see what this is. Information in real time. time is killing the Zionist regime. Information in real time. They are getting informed. They love to say that Israel, the Jews have been kicked out of 109 countries on earth. But I beg to differ, y'all. If you go back to one of my posts, I posted all the places that Jews have been kicked out on earth, and it was over 773 places. The world is starting to wake up and see the bullshit that they have created for centuries and millenniums. And people are starting to say, man, we ain't letting this go down. So that's the difference now. And some people say, or right here it says how Israel lost Europe. Israel lost Europe when they went on the campaign, the hate Muslim campaign. After 1492, they went on a terrible Muslim hate campaign. That tore families apart in Europe, communities apart in Europe. And they seen who was the aggressor. They seen who was the agitator. And it wasn't Christians. And it wasn't a Muslim. It was a Yahudi. Or as the Quran loves to call them and clarify them as, those that call themselves Jews. See, that's a big difference. That's what a lot of people didn't understand in the Quran. The Quran refers to the Ashkenazi as those that call themselves Jews. He is telling you they're not Jews, but they will call themselves Jews. And that's how Israel lost Europe, because Europe was ruled by Muslims for over 700 years, and they prospered. Took them out of the Dark Ages, into the Enlightenment period, into the Revolutionary period. He woke them up only to bring them out the caves of the Caucasus Mountains to have their relative start acting like this. Now they know. So now, those that call themselves Jews have to do everything in the world to stop the exposement of their pathological behavior. Because like I said, if it was the child and not the school, the child is going to be singled out. But how do you blame a school? You already know the school is fucked up. So instead of sending your badass kid to a fucked up school, you try to camouflage him with everybody else to send him to school. But he still sticks out like a sore thumb. Let's finish running this content.
But what's interesting about this is that it's from 2012. One of the things they were reacting to was that 2011 UN vote we looked at before. What looks to us now like it had been a big pro-Israel wave in Europe, at the time it looked like Europe turning on Israel. And this makes more sense if we rewind a few years more to 2008.
Diese historische Verantwortung Deutschlands.
This is German leader Angela Merkel speaking to Israel's parliament. And she said basically, we will support you forever because of the Holocaust.
Das heißt, die Sicherheit Israel.
And that's a shame. Now let's just take the reparations, the slave entity in America. People now in America say that the government owes us nothing because, you know, the people that committed this atrocity are dead. Why make the government pay for it? And that is very much the argument in America against reparations. and is one of the main components of why reparations is not given. So I take that to the Jews, to those that call themselves Jews, right? And say, why shall Germany pay y'all and feel indebted to y'all in real time today when they are not the people that caused iniquity to your people? That's what I want to know. Why must Germany pay Israel and be indebted to Israel for forever when Israel took what Hitler alleged to do to them and is now bringing that axis of evil and that reign of terror to the Middle East?
Das ist für mich als deutsche Bundeskanzlerin niemals verhandelbar.
But look, it's not just Holocaust guilt behind this. There's a bunch of other stuff, like this sense among democracies worldwide that Israel was a like-minded democracy surrounded by hostile dictatorships, and a sense after September 11 that Israel and the West were on the same side in a global war on terror. Plus, there was some Cold War stuff in there before that. And look, my point is that there's a lot going on in European support for Israel, but it's all anchored to stuff that happened in the past. 1945. Arab-Israeli wars in 67, 73.
Invasion of the Golan Heights by Syria and Egypt.
2001, which means the further that those events drift into memory, the less kind of cultural and political scaffolding there is for that relationship to exist, especially as Israel does more and more stuff in the present that upsets or hurts or offends its international sponsors, which is why support for Israel is strongest among older people, whose view of it is rooted in that past. Like, here, look at this. This is Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, speaking to AIPAC in 2018.
Of course, we say it's our land. The Torah says it, but they don't believe in the Torah. So that's the reason there is not peace. They invent other reasons.
So let me ask this question, and I pose a serious question to the keyboards that's here right now. To all my keyboards that's here, right? Shout out to all my keyboards that's here right now with the live, man. Make them likes, match them views. Show some support. You know what I mean? My page is not monetized because I speak out against shit like this. But they speak from the Bible, the Torah, the Talmud, and this is where they get their ideals, their agendas, their narratives, their ideologies, their theologies, their doctrine. This is the foundation of their hate. Listen to what I'm saying. They are using the foundation of religion. I don't care if it's not my religion. They are using the foundation of religion to push a narrative. So since they are doing that, let me ask you this. Do they preach from your Bible, Christians? What do they say about Christians? What do they say about anybody that does not call themselves Jewish? What do they say about being Ashkenazi Jew? Your mother has to be Jewish in order for you to be Jewish. This is why Drake the singer is Jewish and not black, because his mother is a Jew. This is the same reason why Sammy Davis Jr. was accepted into the Rat Pack, because his mother was a Jew. The Ashkenazi Jewish culture believes that you are what your mother is. And that goes against the Bible. Because in the Bible it says you are who your father is. Your lineage is passed down through your father, not through your mother. So once again, Chuck Schumer. To all my Christians that believe in Judeo-Christianity. Do these people preach from your Bible? Why they quote your Bible? Why they quote your book? Why they love to refer to something that is in your book, but is not in their book? And what I mean by not in their book, they have nothing older than the Quran or the Bible. The Talmud is not that old. This is a doctrine that they put together, a script that they have constructed and want people to believe it's a holy scripture. Astaghfirullah. Finish with some of this content.
But they do not believe in a Jewish state, and that is why we in America must stand strong with Israel through thick and thin.
Schumer's obviously coming to this through a kind of Jewish ethno-nationalism. That's why he specifically supports Israel. But he's drawing on, and for a long time got that support because of, a wider sense across Western countries that Israel is quote-unquote like us. But that feeling, that perception, has been steadily eroding, often slowly, but steadily, for as long as I have been writing and reporting on Israel and Palestine. Every year, people learn more about Israel's occupation, settlements, the treatment of Israeli Arabs. And it gets harder and harder to recognize the Israel that we see with our eyes to the Israel that we had been told was this foothold of Western democratic values. And big moments like Gaza or Iran tend to generate a lot of intention that accelerates that shift. This is a recent NBC poll of Americans by age. The green bars measure positive views on Israel, and the yellow bars are negative views. When NBC first ran this back in 2023, older Americans had overwhelmingly positive views of Israel, people my age were more mixed, and younger people were a bit more negative than positive. Fast forward to today, young Americans have turned on Israel 5-1. My generation, it's 2-1 negative on Israel. Older adults are almost split, and only the oldest are like solidly pro-Israel. That is how you get 40 US senators voting for an arms embargo on a country that not that long ago they'd have all felt obligated to pledge their undying support to. Public opinion has shifted really quickly. That is part of why you see this. World governments that had always supported Israel suddenly starting to pivot. But there are some big holdouts, especially Germany, the UK, and the US. Things are changing within each of those countries, like we talked about in the US, but their leaders are resisting pressure to break with Israel. I know it might feel difficult to imagine a real, meaningful Western break with Israel, but, relative to just 10 or 15 years ago, which is not that long in geopolitical terms, it is already sort of happening in ways that recently would have felt impossible. Hey guys, just wanted to quickly pause to say, if you want to learn more about Israel, why it is the way it is, what it's doing, its place in the world, all of that, head to newpress.com/questions for an exclusive video. It's part of a series I'm doing called No Dumb Questions, where I answer big questions about the world. And in this week's, we answer why the US supports Israel, how Israel was created, and more. So what is New Press? New Press is a hub for independent video journalism that I'm building with my teammates Johnny Harris and Ellis. Series I mentioned, No Dumb Questions. Again, free to sign up, newpress.com/questions or the QR code. Okay, back to the video. And Israeli leaders know this, which is why they have a whole plan to prepare for the day that the West breaks with them for real. I actually did a bunch of reporting on this plan a few years ago, and what I found is that Israel had quietly achieved a real degree of autonomy from the US. This had a few components. It made peace with a bunch of the countries it used to need American protection from, like Egypt and Saudi Arabia. It learned how to build big weapon systems domestically. So while, yeah, it's happy to take American and European exports, it can replace a lot of them if needed. Israeli voters have also embraced more hardline nationalism. So they no longer really pressure their leaders to keep foreign powers happy the way they used to. And in some ways, they even want their leaders to defy those foreign powers by doing things like expanding settlements. And look, yes, it is still true that Israel has a ton to gain from American and European weapons, funding, and support. Those play a big role in empowering Israel's war. My point is that Israel has built up its autonomy so that holding on to that support is no longer existential for them, which frees them up to defy those countries, even the United States. Which is how you get moments like Trump last year tweeting at Israel to not bomb Iran, which of course they still did. Or this year, Trump tweeting at Israel that it was prohibited for bombing Lebanon, which, you guessed it, they immediately did anyway. But I mentioned at the start of this video that Israel's plan to survive a breakup with the West.
And that is another reason, or should I say another nail in the coffin for the Zionist regime. Because the world is watching in real time. Like right now, people are abreast to this war. This is not like Vietnam, where the mass majority of Americans was like, kill those commies. This is not like the Japanese War where America took all the Japanese and put them in concentration slave camps on American soil. This is nothing like that. Because now the American people, the descendants of those that were stern racists and stern bigots, are starting to see the true development of that nature, of that thought pattern. This is what these descendants are starting to see. Yes, my family grew me up like that. Yes, my grandma is a racist, but you know what? She's wrong. And that's what America doesn't want you to see. America doesn't want you to see that they are losing the grip of how they control the family. And now these people are waking up and they saying, you know what, Ma, you wrong. This is not the people of the old. This is more advanced thinking. Because if this was the days of old, it wouldn't be like that. But we should honor and congratulate the days of now. It's a struggle now, but we should be more inclined to believe in a better future because people are waking up now. And they are seeing the root of the problem.
Is only sort of working. One component in particular. I wrote about it back in that article. And it's that Israel has been cultivating new allies, right-wing, liberal democracies that actually admire the very actions that had been pushing away its more traditional allies. An Israeli analyst named Dagya Scheimlin, who told me about this, called it kind of mockingly the other friends policy. Let me show you on that map. The big ones are India, Brazil, and Hungary, plus a couple others. Countries whose leaders aren't drawn to Israel because of the past, but because of what it is today, as a symbol of unapologetic militarism and ethno-nationalism. And this worked pretty well for a while. Hungary especially was Israel's best friend in the EU, vetoing all sorts of trade restrictions or sanctions that Europe might have otherwise imposed. But after a couple years, it kind of started to fall apart.
Don't just stand there like a statue. Clean this juice off my floor.
Sanctions that Europe might have otherwise imposed. But after a couple years, it kind of started to fall apart. Israel's buddy in Brazil lost re-election and got sentenced to jail time for a failed coup attempt. And its ally in Hungary lost power too, actually just a few weeks into the Iran war. And the new guy in power there has already said his government would arrest Netanyahu on war crimes charges if he visited Hungary. Better look at that map again. Brazil out, Hungary out. That Israeli diplomatic resurgence is looking pretty short-lived. So what does all this mean? Look, when I started reporting on Israel and its place in the world back in 2010 or 2011, it was honestly unthinkable to me that the Western pro-Israel world would ever cool to it to the extent that it already has. And I know that to a lot of you, especially if you're on the younger side, that probably sounds crazy. Because if you look around you, it looks like the West supports Israel as unreservedly as it ever has. You know, the US just started an entire open-ended global economy destroying war with Iran, basically as a favor to Israel. Western weapons are funding Israel's wars in Gaza and Lebanon. I'm not blind, I see all this. But I am telling you, if you take a step back, if you look at the bigger picture, the kind of longer timeline here, that support is starting to look kind of tenuous. We are not talking about a wide and deep pro-Israel consensus across the Western world anymore. We are talking about a handful of countries that are increasingly isolated in backing Israel, led by leaders who are acting in defiance of their publics, their political parties, even their own core supporters. I'm sure you've heard that Hemingway quote, change happens slowly and then all at once. We are in the happen slowly part right now, but it feels like that all at once is...
And this is what I was saying. How does Trump fix this, right? Because people was, you know, Pharaoh, you was a Trump supporter and you know this and that. So how does Trump fix this now that, you know, and what I said, there's only one way Trump can fix this. And I said it already. The only way Trump can fix the situation, and the only way the situation is gonna get fixed, is when Trump turns on Israel. And it's gonna happen. Because, like Max, if you really take a look at what's going on. Yeah, they might have helped Israel. Yeah, they helped start the war. But you also know that America could have did a lot more and could do a lot more than what it has done and what it will do. We all know the American might of the military. We all know it's vicious. So ask yourself, why hasn't Trump unleashed? He called it Operation Fury. When we knew that was to make everybody scared. Why didn't he unleash the fury upon Iran? Why he just didn't decimate Iran? Why he just didn't flatten them out? It's because it's like I said before, and I continue to say it in the war report, that Trump doesn't really want to be in this war. Trump fucked up when he took that $250 million from them Zionist donors. He wanted the money. If you actually look at Trump's background, he takes the money and then turns you around and kicks you in the ass until you get out the office. What can Israel do to America other than expose the naughtiness, the criminality within the fabric of the American elite? Israel can't strike America. Israel can't do shit to America because they have already been exposed. 9/11, October 7. Why the fuck does that sound like somebody rhyming? It's because they want to play games. They want to burn it into your brain. 9/11, October 7, August 7. I think it's August 7. Why was there a stand down order on August 7th and when they was having that concert? Why were IDF soldiers pulled from there? Why did the Jewish owner of the towers, knowing it had asbestos in it, take out an insurance policy against terrorist attacks involving a plane weeks before it happened? Over 3,000 Jews worked in the 3 buildings, but none of them went to work that day. The owner of the building always has breakfast there, but for some odd reason, just didn't make it that day. And these are the mathematical questions I don't need answers to because I already have my own assessment. But these are mathematical questions that real Americans are starting to ask themselves. Why was they around this situation? Why was that around this situation also? And why were they dancing and looking? Oh, let me see something else. Oh, I heard they were involved in this. Let me see if what the fuck? These people, boy, listen. I've already told them. This is the only way in the world on an economical level. Hey, the world on an economical level is showing Trump this. If you don't deal with Israel, we're going to deal with y'all through sanctions like you sanctioned us. And we will kick your military out. It ain't, see, America has put themselves and exposed themselves into a position that they can't get out of. Because if these countries continue to watch America run behind Israel in this unadulterated war, they're going to tell American bases, y'all got to go. They have the power, the legitimacy. The eyes is on them. So the only way for this to be fixed is if Trump fix it. That's the only way.
Coming up fast. We might look back 5-10 years from now and feel that actually it was as of this moment that it was already here.
Look, I'm gonna let y'all know too, man. Everybody subscribe to that comment. He did his thing. Really gave us some in-depth comment. But now, what I want to bring up here.
If your partner constantly hides their phone.
What I want to bring up here is, hold on, give me a second. And what I want to bring up here is we watched the talks. And a lot of people would say, oh, that's AI, that's fake news. This and that. But let me give you, see, people are getting used to people saying shit is fake that when it mathematically adds up. Also remind you, over 60% of Israelis condone what their government is doing. This is why American citizens was hated so much around the world, because they condoned what the American government was doing. That's why America, you don't see nobody talking about, oh, we gonna kidnap these Africans. We gonna kidnap these Mexicans. Like, don't nobody say that. The only person they say they're gonna kidnap is Americans. Why? Because 9 times out of 10, not only do they think they got money, but they support their government. So they also look at them as, you support the government, you with them. Over 50% of the Israeli populace support the government. Does that make them civilians? They support their government 100%. Does that make them civilians? Please put it in the comments. Hey, y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is. It's your boy Pharaoh the God. Always on the job. I got 5 less talk. And as always, it's real talk. Raw talk. And you know, it's that time again. To tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another motherfucking friend. Share, like, and subscribe. It don't cost you much to touch. So support the channel. Support your boy. And above all, support the motherfucking movement. Israel and America have put themselves on front stage, not thinking they were going to be exposed. And now, this is one of the things, the same thing that made you laugh, it's the same thing that's making them cry. See, they were glad when the internet came out and people were losing their minds and they were able to hold their phones all day in their hands and get them off of real situations. They thought they was gonna develop enough fuckery across social media that the brain was going to be infested with lives and cow shit. But now we are seeing in real times people's minds changing. On a lighter note, more serious note, y'all go check out the movie Michael Jackson, the new one. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm definitely gonna go see it. I didn't want to go see it because I thought it was gonna be biased, and I thought it was gonna be bullshit. I didn't think that they was gonna tell the truth. And from what I've heard, it's very much watching. So go watch it. My niece, she said, "Uncle, I never understood why you didn't like Jews." And she said, now that I seen the Michael Jackson video, the movie, I understand. And I'm not gonna say those was my words, but people may take that because I exposed the fuckery and the bad behavior. It is not the fact that I don't like Jews. I dislike the people those that call themselves Jews, the Zionists, and those that are adjacent to Zionism. Those are the ones I don't like. It just so happens that the ones that are doing a lot of the fuckery are the ones with a lot of money and power. So before we get into this content, man, y'all support the channel with that like button, man. If you are in tune and you like the content, you like my assessments, go ahead and give me a shot, man. Hit that sub button, man. It don't cost you nothing to be a boss, man. So let's run this content, man. Don't forget to hit that like button.
The European Union has agreed new sanctions against Israeli settlers. The bloc points to a surge in violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank since the start of the war in Gaza. Israel has denounced the measures, calling the sanctions arbitrary and political.
In Brussels, EU foreign ministers approved new sanctions to blacklist individual Israeli settlers and organizations. The measures had been blocked for months by the former Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, but the new government in Budapest has now lifted the veto.
Today, we reached a political agreement to sanction Israeli extremist settlers and entities. This goes together with new sanctions on leading Hamas figures. This means that we move from the political deadlock that was there for a long time. Violence and extremism carry consequences.
The new sanctions reflect rising violence against Palestinians as Israeli settlements expand in the occupied West Bank. The EU says there has been a surge in violence by settlers since the Gaza war began in October 2023. Israel's foreign minister, however, has condemned the EU's decision.
Después de mi accidente de auto, me hubiese gustado saber.
Israel's foreign minister, however, has condemned the EU's decision.
The European Union has chosen, in an arbitrary and political manner, to impose sanctions on Israeli citizens and entities because of their political views and without any basis.
Despite the agreement, EU nations remain divided over whether to go further, with some pushing for broader economic measures against Israeli settlements.
Our Brussels correspondent Rosie Bertrand is on the story. Rosie, tell us more about these sanctions. What's the idea behind them?
The idea is to have some sort of punitive measure in response to what the EU says is a surge in violence against Palestinians. Now, this is a measure which had been on EU ministers' table for months. It had been long stalled, and I think most here think it was also really long overdue. Once we saw that new Hungarian government sworn in over the weekend, that appeared to be the thing which shifted the dial, lifted that veto, and meant that this measure could move forward. But Nicole, make no mistake, this is seen as an absolute lowest common denominator. There are all sorts of other ideas which have been knocking around EU ministers' table for months and even years at this stage over tougher punitive measures against not only violent settlers but against, in fact, the Israeli government. And those, for now, still really remain stalled and don't seem to be moving anywhere fast due to the bitter divisions between EU members on this topic of ties with Israel, which is one of those which causes such deep disagreement between these countries.
Let's zoom in on Germany, because Berlin has a strong but diplomatically sensitive relationship with Israel. Is Germany fully backing these sanctions?
Yes, Germany is fully backing these sanctions against violent settlers and groups that are seen as supporting them. But beyond that, Germany is not in favour of any tougher EU-level action against the Israeli government, which has been proposed so far. So we saw in the past Germany blocking a proposed measure to downgrade trade ties with Israel. Instead, Berlin has been urging for dialogue with Israel. And I should say that that has been frustrating some other EU countries. It really struck me today to hear Luxembourg's foreign minister making what I think was a really thinly veiled allusion to Germany when he said some countries are using their history in a way which he says is preventing any EU action. He says that has rendered him speechless. So there is some criticism of Berlin on that front, although that's criticism, of course, that Germany pushes back strongly against. It says it really does advocate strongly for a two-state solution and does try to hold the Israeli government accountable.
Some in the EU have proposed trade sanctions on Israel as well. Can we expect movement on that front now?
Okay, so on this proposal which we had last year, which was to downgrade trade ties entirely, that seems to me to be moving nowhere. And that really is because Germany and some other EU countries, including Italy, are blocking it. They don't want it to move. Where we may see some movement over the next couple of weeks, maybe months, is a proposal that's come from France and Sweden to restrict or ban trade with illegal Israeli settlements. So to restrict the import of goods into the EU from those settlements. That is something which the EU's Foreign Affairs Chief says she's talking to her trade colleague about to try and get some sort of a proposal on the table there. And we've heard a call from some member states that have been very vocal about this, the likes of Spain, Ireland, saying we need to move forward on this. There is no actual proposal for them to consider just now, but we may see something coming to their table in the next couple of weeks for them to review. Although, of course, the precedent here is that they get these proposals for sanctions on their table, and that's kind of where they remain. They end up frozen due to this disunity, and that may be what happens with this proposal on restricting trade with illegal settlements as well.
All right, now that these sanctions have been approved, tell us what happens next. How will these measures actually be implemented?
So in the next couple of days, we're going to get published in the EU's official journal. So that's where these laws are actually published, the names of the people and organisations which are going to be blacklisted under this latest raft of sanctions. And those people and organisations will then be banned from travelling to the EU. Any assets they have in the EU will be frozen, and it will become illegal for any EU entities to do business with them. So they're designed really to pack a punch here. And what we've heard from human rights campaigners is that they want this to be a starting point rather than for the EU to say, okay, we've made this measure now and we're going to take our pedal off the gas. They want further measures to try and ensure some sort of accountability. Remember, the EU is Israel's biggest trading partner.
If the EU gets this approved, it doesn't matter if America continues to back them. Their goods aren't coming from America. Their goods are mainly coming from Europe. So if they blacklist these entities, they freeze their money, what do you think the next small country is going to do about airspace or landing strips or any type of government relations, economical infrastructure, political and or otherwise? This could be just right now a lot of mumbo jumbo. A lot of it can be a lot of run around the mill. It can be a lot of gibberish. But as they say, this is a starting point. Sometimes people just throw it out there and see where it's going to stick, who's going to go with it. They have the idea, but who's going to back it? Who's going to stick their hand in the air with me and say, we're going a different route? If this begins to happen, Israel will be in big trouble. Israel doesn't want to be in big trouble. Israel wants to, and this is my God honest truth, Israel wants to actually stop the war and rebuild because they've been getting their ass kicked. They want to find out another way, but they know that they shook ground now They tried the surprise attack. That failed. The war is failing. There is no time to go back to the drawing board with the crayons and try to draw another picture. Israel knows this. And Israel knows if they stop now, they know that the other Muslim countries are not going to bomb them. What Israel fears is that those countries they will out-legitimize Israel and its agenda and narratives. It out-legitimizes Israel's political structure. That is what Israel fears. It is not losing the war. They know. That's why they keep saying, Dirtbag Bibi continues to say, we only have one shot left. He needs America to destroy the regime, to cripple him. Not setting them back infrastructure decades, no. Israel needs fear to be placed and control and domination to be instituted into Iran from a foreign structure. And if that doesn't happen, Israel fears that it will count its days. Israel is lashing out of its own fear. Ain't nobody worried about Israel, but Israel is worried about everybody else. Let's finish running this content.
DW's Rosie Burchard there in Brussels. Thanks so much for your reporting, Rosie.
Well, let's get more from Israel now. Our correspondent Emily Gordine joins us from Jerusalem. Emily, tell us more about Israel's response to these sanctions.
Well, Israel rejected firmly this decision. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, we saw it just in the reports, that the EU imposed these sanctions in a, quote, arbitrary and political manner. He's basically rejecting the premise that these sanctioned settlers committed human rights abuses, and that reflects a sort of a wider response from Israeli officials who are treating this politically motivated action rather than something that is based on evidence on the ground. Now, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who was a co-founder of one of the organizations that has now been sanctioned and to which he still holds very close links, called in response to the annexation of quote, strategic areas in the occupied West Bank. We've not actually had a response from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, although he did hold a security meeting tonight, though that is likely going to have focused on the ongoing conflict with Iran rather than these EU measures.
Are these sanctions, Emily, likely to make any difference on the ground there in the West Bank?
All right, let's go!
Sanctions, Emily, likely to make any difference on the ground there in the West Bank?
I think it's unlikely. The sanctions target a small number of individuals and organizations, and they likely knew that this was coming. What matters is how protected they are on the ground, and as things stand, and this is something that human rights organizations have long criticized, is that these settlers who live on occupied Palestinian land in the West Bank, they act with complete impunity and in fact are in some cases aided and protected, in many cases in fact, by the Israeli state, and that's been documented by human rights organizations, Israeli as well as international ones, for months and years. And if anything, really, I think what we're likely going to see, and we've seen this in the past when, for example, countries recognise the Palestinian state, Israel moved closer to annexing territory in the occupied West Bank, effectively making the situation even more difficult on the ground. Now, the question is, though, and I think that's where the bigger weight lies, is whether the EU will move to a larger package that could curb trade on goods from these illegal settlements. But at this point, from what we understand, there's no majority at the EU for this. But this would carry a lot of economic weight if the EU would go forward with this.
So how are these sanctions likely to impact Israel's relationship with the EU and its member states, including Germany?
Well, I think this certainly marks a deterioration, but these sanctions, again, they're targeted and limited to specific settlers and organizations, and critics certainly have described them as largely symbolic. They're not state level. There were countries at the EU level that also wanted to include Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, and Bezalel Smotrich, as well as Finance Minister, on this sanctions list for their radical rhetoric. That did not happen, and there is a bloc at the EU that includes Germany that is still very protective of Israel when it comes to these sanctions packages, vis-a-vis some of their EU member state colleagues, if you so want. Now again, though, this step is, if you look at it from the wider perspective, the step is essentially, though it could build momentum to a larger package, right? The EU is Israel's largest trading partner, so the EU carries weight. It is important for Israel. So if there is a possibility that this measure builds momentum, leads to, just as Rosie just said, there are lots of ideas on the table. If this could lead to sanctions that affect Israel's trade relations directly with the EU, I think that is when it could get really dangerous for the EU-Israel relationship. But again, we are still very far away from that.
Emily, thank you very much. That was DW's Emily Gordine in Jerusalem.
Let me know what y'all think. For me, it is becoming strictly bad for Israel. And I just think that the gloves is coming off, so to speak. People are not holding back from what they see and how they feel about these actions. They are no longer staying quiet. They are no longer holding their voice. They are seeing the statistics of over 60% of Israeli citizens condone what the government is doing. They see this. The world sees it. Thank you all for rocking with another episode of I Got Five Let's Talk the War Report. As you know, I'm your host, man. My assessment of today's topic of the War Report: Israel's being exposed for its actions. And now it has to pay the price for it. Whatever that price may be. Sanctions, trade block, turning their back on them, whatever it may be, Israel is definitely in trouble. Y'all know the motto, man. Take care of each other. And if you can't do that, take care of your motherfucking self. We out.